Good morning. This is Daily Hebrew Declarations with Daniel Jedediah Cook, and I'm reading the declaration for today, February the 22nd, 2021. The three Hebrew letters we're honoring today are Nun, Tav, and Shin. Along with those three living letters, we're also honoring the spirit of understanding and the spirit of might. The declaration today reads this: the fullness of a son that carries within the power of an inheritance, transitioning from faith to fulfillment. As the mark of the covenant, we are the mark of revelation, knowing we have always been what we were always meant to be. Shin reminds us to lay hold of the promises of Yahweh and to not let go. Today's declaration begins talking about the place of the fullness of a son that carries within the power of inheritance, transitioning from faith to fulfillment. And I know on Saturday when we were doing our declaration, it reminded me of some things that Yahweh has been speaking to me about here lately. And I remember back when Lauren was little, our daughter was little, and there would be times in the middle of the night when she would wake up, and instead of my wife getting up to take care of her, especially when she was small, then I would get up and we had some milk ready, and I would get the milk ready and I would feed her in the middle of the night as a way of allowing my wife the opportunity to get some sleep. And to me, it was a beautiful time because it was a time of connection. It was a time of really a heart to heart. And then as she got a little bit older, I remember thinking about times when things were a little bit tough, and I would sit and get up in the middle of the night sometimes and put her back up on my chest and begin to rock her to sleep. But the whole time I was thinking about difficulties and things that were happening, and just so much stuff. And it's not that I don't know. Let me just say it like this. Yahweh brought this back to my memory, and he began to speak to me about the place of where we are timeless in him. The fact that in him we stand in the past, the present, and the future all together at the same time. You see, as a son, we have the right and the responsibility of this place. And so that's why I told you guys on Saturday how I began to inside of me put myself back in that same place, and then allow the fullness of what Yahweh has the frequency and the fullness of what Yahweh has released inside of me now to begin to reverberate, not only while I was holding her, but into my daughter at the same time. And it wasn't like I was thinking of things like along the lines of DNA or that sort of thing. This was just plain and simply redeeming time. And so, when I think about today's declaration, I think about the Hebrew word for grace, which is chen. And it begins to open up a whole nother door. Our year two will be talking about chen tomorrow during our School of the Living Letters for year two. And we're gonna engage the different prospects of this. But you see, a lot of times when we think about grace, we also think about mercy because we talk about the mercy and grace of Yahweh. Yesterday, I heard Pastor Elijah Ward at Gates of Zion, one of the pastors there. He began to speak about something that I'd heard before, but for some reason it really just grabbed a hold of me this time, more so than it ever had before. And that is that when we speak about having mercy, we usually ask that in the sense of, Yahweh, I want mercy in your judgment. I want mercy in your judgment. Don't let the judgment that it needs to come here to be something that is harsh or hard. Yahweh, may I have mercy in your judgment. And he said something that really struck me. And again, I've heard it before because I've heard Apostle Aaron say it before. But in this case, it grabbed a hold of me like I'd never known before. And that was, your mercy is your judgment. Your mercy is your judgment. In other words, when Yahweh speaks a judgment over something, he's saying, this is my judgment. I'm giving you my mercy. But it began to stir up this place of grace as well, because we've got a bunch of different definitions for grace. And you may be asking right now, even, how does this fit with the three living letters? Well, Really, it fits with all three of them. The Nun, the fact that we're a son, that we're a king, an heir, and a priest. The fact that Yahweh has given us everything that we need that pertains to life and godliness, and He's given us the authority in the Nun. He's given us the authority to be able to accomplish and to do those things. The Tav, the marking. You see, one of the ways that I see Tav is also as a doorway. And really, truthfully, it's a doorway into the next place. Now, I see Michelle and I, and of course through Apostle Aaron, because these are some things that we have been talking about for years. And Apostle Aaron had a revelation of the living letter Ga. And I believe that when we step through Tav, when we step through the completion, when we step through the beginning, there is a spiraling that leads us to the new beginning on the other side of that. So we're completing something. It's coming fulfilled, it's coming full and lacking nothing. And then it begins a new part of the process. It steps us over into the next phase. It moves us into the place where we now have the opportunity to use what Yahweh has given us, and we have completed from before. The analogy I always like to give is that of a house. You know, if I spend the time to build a house, then why am I doing that? Well, I'm not doing it just to say, oh, what a beautiful house when I'm completed. No, there is a finishing to a new beginning, because at that place where I finish the house, then I'm able to move into and begin to use that new house. And you see, that's exactly the way that Yahweh is carrying us through with these things. And today's three letters, really even more fully engage this aspect of this, because the Shin, when we look at Shin, we think about fire, we think about tooth. And that's the reason why Michelle said at the end of today's declaration, Shin reminds us to lay hold of the promises of Yahweh and to not let go. Because one of the literal ways that you can see Shin is as teeth. And you can also see it as fire. I know that can be confusing a little bit, but just remember, both teeth and fire consume. And let Holy Ghost, I want Holy Ghost to begin to draw you into the understanding of that. But not only that, because of the fact that both teeth and fire consume, they're consuming it for energy. And so in that place of the energy, then Shin becomes an action letter to me. It becomes a place of completion, or not, and well, completion of doing, of performing something, of going somewhere, of doing something. So Shin talks about this place of an action. And so in that, then Nun, the son, the king, and the heir, and the priest, has been marked, has been taken to a completion, the finishing, to what? To begin the action of something new. You see, those are the promises that Yahweh has given us. This is the place of where we are. But when I talk about Chain, when I talk about that living letter, I look at that word. I look at Chet and Nun final. Now, I know we're not talking about those particular letters today, but they're speaking today, and I want to address them. Chet talks to me about the place of covenant, the place of promises, the place really where we are yoked together with Yahweh, and that we share the burden with Him, and He really takes the majority of the weight. My yoke is easy and my burden is light, and Chet becomes that yoke. You see, one of the other ways that you can see Chet is also as a fence or a boundary, and so you almost think about it as the aspect of the sheepfold, where Yeshua being the shepherd himself, and that we are in his sheepfold being protected. But then the other day, Yahweh began to speak to me as a good friend of mine was talking about the firmament. And it's a word that Yahweh has given him, and I don't want to get too deep into what we discussed about that because it's his word. And I'm excited to hear what Yahweh is sharing with him about this word firmament. But as we were talking, I began to see another aspect of that. I began to see the firmament, which in Hebrew is seen as almost an impenetrable barrier, and it separates the waters above from the waters below. But what Yahweh began to show me was the picture of a veil, and how At the moment where Yeshua died on the cross and he rent the veil of the temple in two, he tore apart that veil. And the veil of the firmament, the veil where the waters below and the waters above have been separated, are no longer separated. We're able to move through into the waters above. You see, this is the place Yahweh is calling us. Come up here, and I will show you great and mighty things that are about to come.